So I'm joined by Jessica Stonish today, who's head of marketing at life science SaaS company Synthace. And since my time working at SPT LabTech, who collaborate with Synthace in the design of experiment space, I've kind of been a bit of a secret fan of Synthace's marketing. I've admired the brand, the content, the message. So I'm really excited to have Jessica on today to talk about the journey that Synthace have been on to gain that image in the market, and really just excited to learn about their transition that they've made from a typical kind of lead orientated life science company, that old school mindset, to just a modern demand gen machine. You know, I just love it. And at the same time, I'm really excited to get to know Jessica and understand her story and path to head of marketing at Synthace. So Jessica, great to have you here. And for the people that aren't familiar with you and your background, how do you describe what you do?
Sure. So nice to be here. What do I do? So I feel like demand gen is always something that's really hard to describe to people. It's something that it's like, it was a buzzword for a while in the marketing industry, and people were considering it performance marketing and paid ads and lead gen. And that's really not what it is. So in my view, demand generation is building trust with your audience. And part of that is just through having conversations, sometimes starting the conversations and sharing your point of view around an issue or a pain point or a challenge that your product solves. So in the life sciences specifically, we have all of these biologists who are doing science the same way that we did it 20 years ago. And they've got things scribbled in a lab notebook, and then they're manually pipetting, and they've got these amazing lab robots that they don't know how to use. And there's a lot of pressure put on scientists. And what good demand generation does is it really, really dives into your audience, what they're dealing with, what they need. In this case, like a lot of it was DOE, right? Design of experiments is a very complicated methodology. A lot of people know about it. They're too scared about it. Providing education and awareness around that and just helping them win at their jobs. And then they know who to trust when they do enter some kind of buying cycle where they're like, okay, now we need a solution for this problem. You're going to think of Synthace first because we're the people who are talking about it. They have built, they know who our subject matter experts are. They know that we know what we're doing and we know what we're talking about. And so they trust us before they even want to demo the product. And that's really what demand generation is. It's not paid ads. It's not lead gen campaigns. Like those are tactics that you use to build out a wider strategy.
Yeah. So at your role at Synthace as head of marketing, I suppose, are you kind of responsible for the entire demand gen motion going on?
Yes. So when I first joined Synthace, I was the demand generation manager. So my entire job was demand, and we were doing webinars. I took over LinkedIn. I took over our paid media campaigns. So the standard demand gen channels. I will say we have a content marketing manager who she's just a brilliant writer, and she does wonders with really, really in-depth technical content development. And then we have an incredible designer, and then an events person who has mastered the events and conferences plan. So when it comes to full-time marketers, it's really just myself and our content marketing manager.
Amazing. Yeah, really interesting. And I'd love to kind of take a step back and almost go back in time in your career, because when I was looking at it, it's quite an interesting path, actually. I mean, I'm sure you'll spill the beans, but starting your journey, as far as I could see anyway, from an SEO strategist, quite a tactical role, all the way to head of marketing at Synthace, broad role, a life science company. Like, how did that journey go?
Sure. So as everyone will soon learn, I've done a little bit of everything in a very eclectic variety of industries. So I have a lot of really, really in-depth knowledge about the most random things. So I've always liked writing, and one of my favorite classes in college was communications classes. So marketing just felt like the natural fit that had a wider range of career opportunities. I got my first job at a local agency through an alumni connection, and I'm based in Buffalo, New York. So it was just, a small local digital marketing agency. And I was mostly doing SEO work for small local businesses. So roofing companies, HVAC companies, dentists, exterminators, things like that. Like that's where my random knowledge first came from. Like, how many blogs did I write about dental implants? Because that company was trying to rank for dental implants. But at the time, SEO was all about metadata, header hierarchy, basic content strategy. Like, are your long tail keywords in the right place? And is your Google My Business page set up, sitemaps, really entry level SEO work that can make a big impact for small local businesses. And so it was just very, very entry level. And so I would say that's where I got just my foot in the door with marketing and some real life experience. I expanded my skill set considerably during my next role as the digital marketing manager for a local hospitality company. They had one boutique hotel that was doing really well, and they were opening a huge hotel and conference center with an original concept restaurant in a National Historic Landmark building. Their bread and butter was basically like, let's build these incredible hospitality concepts in these really old buildings that are on the brink of decay. They basically rehabilitate the buildings and give them new life. And it was just something really, really cool to be a part of. But I got to build a brand, an audience from scratch. I ran all the social media accounts. I built my first website and really owned an omni-channel marketing strategy for the first time. My local SEO knowledge was really helpful because these were, at the end of the day, still small local businesses. You still had to do all of that local SEO. But I got into email marketing and social media advertising and PR, graphic design. Like, I'm not a graphic designer. I can work Canva decently. Yeah. But it was a really formative experience. And that's when I really got my hands on all of these different channels that are available to us and how they work and how you need to lay out content for them to be consumed, because, how somebody reads, or skims content on a website is very different than how they consume content on LinkedIn versus email. Even if you're pushing out the exact same content, it's going to look different on all of them, right? So that's where I kind of learned that. So from there, I got into B2B industrial manufacturing marketing, which is a beast of its own, right? That was my first time out of like, I'm talking to the general public. Now we're in B2B. We have very unique processes and a lot of, I would say, deeply ingrained cultural expectations from the companies that we work with. Like, this is the way that we do things. We've always done things this way, and we're going to keep doing things this way. Any blog post is going to have 30 people look at it. Like, legal's got to look at your Facebook post. Like, that level of global industrial corporate, like manufacturing corporation. So that was my first global company, my first real foray into like dedicated content marketing. Like, I owned the content calendar. I built it from scratch. I took over, a newsletter. I got into product marketing, product launches, sales enablement, things like that. That's where I started really broadening from like, okay, I'm just doing digital marketing to doing more full funnel work. And, big projects like consolidating 25 websites into one global website. And my manager from there, actually, she pulled me into the world of SaaS. She moved on into a SaaS company and she was like, listen, like, I want you to come work for me again. We're doing this. And I was like, great, love it. I've wanted to get into SaaS. It's fast paced, it's scrappy. You can make a really, really big impact really, really quickly. And there isn't all of that structure that you have at a global corporation where you need legal to look at everything. And typically there's this really forward for thinking mindset that is embedded in the company culture that like, yes, do what you need to do it fast, fail fast, whatever you need to do to make an impact. So that's how I got into the SaaS world. And that was really my first formal entry into demand generation. So I had started employing some demand generation tactics at the manufacturing company. They're going to play a lot better in a SaaS startup, right? So that's where I built a virtual event series that fed into our YouTube and podcast channels, and it really blossomed into a thriving community of edtech professionals. So it was our software was student engagement software for colleges and universities. So think of an admissions counselor who can send out text updates around important application dates, or if they know they have a high-risk student or maybe a first-generation college student who maybe doesn't have someone at home who knows what that process looks like, you can text them one-on-one and really support them that way. And coming out of the pandemic, like these people were beaten down and the students were non-responsive because they'd just been through it. And there was this big gap where community really, really flourished. And, like my first time creating and owning a newsletter, and I got to work with some really, really amazing people, which has been similar to my time at Synthace. So I got my taste of startup, tech, SaaS, loved it. When I joined Synthace, and you touched on it, but Synthace is a digital experiment platform that helps biologists, especially those in R&D for pharmaceutical companies, run faster, more powerful experiments. And at Synthace, I'm surrounded by brilliant people. You learn so much so fast. And yeah, I entered in as demand generation manager, worked my way to head of marketing. But a lot of the work that I'm doing now is positioning, product management, or product marketing, I should say, pipeline optimization, sales alignment work. So when you've been in a million industries and they're all very, very different, and you're using all of these channels in all of these industries, you really learn about why knowing your audience matters and what levers to pull, what channels to execute on that's going to make the biggest impact for that group. So that's kind of the really long-winded multi-stop journey that got me here.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. And I kind of see some of my own path in that, in like the kind of scrappy stuff, doing kind of everything, like the omni-channel marketing, like just having to get stuck into graphic design, dabble in a bit of web development, like doing all these things because you have to, but it's such a great foundational learning experience that lets you like communicate better with other people, but just like have a solid understanding of digital marketing and demand generation. So within that journey, and I suppose your first demand generation role was at Mongoose, right? That's the company. I'd love to dive in a bit deeper into that time and that experience kind of as your first like demand gen role, because it looks like you really worked to almost define the whole demand gen strategy. And that was really when you almost started leaning into and aligning to modern buyer preferences. Like on your LinkedIn profile alone, you've got these incredible stats out there, which I'm sure I'm going to reference now, or just a few of them, right? Increased marketing generated new revenue from 25 to 73% year on year. Amazing. Increased marketing source new opportunities from 10% to 50% in 12 months, generated over 1 mil in new revenue from webinar strategy. Like this list goes on and on. Like there are some seriously incredible achievements in there. And I'd just love to know and dive into kind of how that overall strategy panned out. And is that kind of where you started to lean in more to these modern buyer preferences and demand gen tactics?
Yeah, so I would say that I actually started at the industrial manufacturing company. That's when I first was embracing a new world of marketing operations that was new to me at that stage. I basically owned our HubSpot implementation and setup at that company. And so marketing ops, I was all of a sudden marketing ops. And I'm building out these lead nurture email workflows. And I'm like, I hate this. And like, not that I hate this because like I hate building out HubSpot workflows. I do now, but at the time it was something new and it was simple enough that it didn't give me a migraine. But I was like, I hate this. And I would hate receiving these emails. Like I would hate buying like this. No one, I can't think of anybody who would want to buy like this. Like, oh, here's a series of automated emails with content that is like kind of related to this blog you looked at and this gated piece. And then like, we're going to close with a really awkward sales push when like you've shown no purchase intent at all. And you're clearly not in a buying cycle, but like, we're going to do it anyway. Like if I got a series of emails like that, like I'm never buying from that company ever. When I do enter the buyer's journey, like I'm gonna be like, no, they were so annoying. Like, why did they send me those? So
Yeah, it's
that's
so funny, isn't it? So funny.
That's when like I had the epiphany, right? And you know, that audience kind of did, just because like we were selling into like these small local, not all small local businesses. Some of them were national chains or international chains, but you know, these people were, you know, more engaged with more dated marketing strategies. They just like, they didn't care as much. I mean, once you get to Mongoose, like then your audience really cares. So one of the first things I wanted to do is like, I want to shut down all these lead nurture emails. Like this is a complete waste of everybody's time. And they were like so needlessly complicated too. So like, let's shut this down. This is a way, we're going to pause this because like you look at the numbers, they're like converting at what, 1%, like horrible conversion metrics to people who are actually converting from these strategies. And then we looked at our webinar strategy. And when I walked into Mongoose, it was like, they had really, really good people there. Like the bones were pretty good. They had some content that was being put out, but it was very much like a reactive, almost marketing agency setup. Like, you know, they were doing blogs. They were just posting the links to social. They were taking a lot of requests from CS and sales and just doing one pagers and nurture emails, like a very standard, like marketing exists as like an execution center for the rest of the company, not a growth center for the company. So, I mean, we had a webinar strategy in place. We basically changed it from let's talk about ourselves and our product and what it does. And let's change it to, we know that our audience is very worried about this one thing. Let's educate them about the one thing. So in that case, there were a lot of changes going around in texting compliance, and everyone's freaking out about it because, I mean, it's compliance. Everyone always freaks out about compliance. So we had some of our in-house subject matter experts. We basically put them on and they spoke to it. And we immediately blew through the Zoom capacity for our webinars. And I had to like panic set up a second webinar like for 2 days later to accommodate everybody. But it was such an immediate, like we pivoted to what good marketing should be and what good demand gen should be, like actually providing value and education. And the response was incredible. So when you walk into like a team like that and you've got good people and you just like redirect them in the right way, it's really, really easy to make a big impact fast.
Amazing. So a couple of questions on that. I suppose all relating to the same thing. So you came into Mongoose, saw the lead nurturing emails were not working, right? I think I could testify to that as well. I've seen the exact same results, you know, like sub 1% conversion rate into customers. Absolutely awful. Pivoted webinars from product focus to kind of solution focus. Love that. Or problem focus, I suppose. Was this something you kind of brought in as an idea in the company and had to push hard? Or was there kind of appetite to do that from other areas? And did you get much pushback on this? Did you have to fight hard to kind of change these things? Or was it a fairly easy transition?
It was fairly easy, mostly because I followed my manager from the previous company into Mongoose. So I already knew that she knew what she was doing. She's a brilliant marketer. She understands demand. She understands what moves the needle. At the time, we were both big fans of Chris Walker and Refine Labs, and that was like the golden age of Demand Gen Live, right? So they were executing this virtual event series on Zoom and just talking to people and creating a community that way. And so I'm like, that's such a low lift way to create community and offer value and fuel the rest of your content strategy. So once we had that first webinar pivot where we blew through our webinar capacity, had to do a second one, like we had proven, like we had that quick win and we had proven the case that we need to make that change. So at that point, making that change, it made sense to do at the higher level. Like nobody fought us on it because they were like, oh, well, clearly this works. We should do more of it. And we were incredibly lucky that we had a member of our content team, he was our content production manager. He had background in radio and he was a comedian and he was just the funniest, nicest guy I've ever met. And everybody loves him. So like, yes, you are the host. Super easy to make that decision. And we had a member of our client success team who just lived and breathed higher ed. Like all of his clients loved him. He's just like, when you dig into his expertise in the industry, he's just brilliant. So, okay, he's going to be our subject matter expert. And so you have like two of the nicest guys I've ever met. One of them has production and radio experience and is a comedian. And then this other guy who's just the most likable guy you've ever met, who knows everything you could possibly need to know about the higher ed industry and the challenges being faced by our audience. It was just a match made in heaven, and the series took off. So we had over 2,000 registrants. We had, typically it was over 200 people who were attending live. Like the worst episodes had like 180 people. Like live, that's insane, right? So it just really hit home with our audience, who these people, these are the faculty, admissions faculty at higher education like institutions that were seeing a nosedive after COVID. Like enrollment was down. Students are having a really, really hard time. They've gone radio silent to their traditional means of communication, and they need something like texting or a chatbot to help walk them through the website or help connect with them on their phone where they are. So it was just, we had great people in house. We had a great point of view. We had education that our audience needed, and they had this community void where they're all suffering in silence independently. And to be able to kind of like come together as a community was really, really huge for them. And it created incredible awareness of our brand and trust in it.
Yeah, it sounds quite transformational actually for the business, and quite inspirational. In terms of that series then, which sounded like, a core component of the demand gen strategy, a couple of questions, just dive in a bit deeper into it.
Sure.
How did you get so many registrants in the first place? What was the demand gen process to get those signups?
It was just email and social. So Synthace is really the first company that I've actually had a marketing budget. I've just always run on really, really lean marketing teams. Like, again, it's especially in startup world, like you don't have just money to burn. You can just throw money at something, right? And I will say, like, now that I do have some kind of ad budget at Synthace, I'm like, oh, this really works. Holy crap. But at Mongoose, we didn't have anything like that. We weren't going to blow a ton of money on paid ads, especially when we were coming in, we were making all of these pivotal changes. So LinkedIn and email were really the primary, and organic LinkedIn, right? So this was before they made all the algorithm changes that you can't use a link, right? So if you start pushing out, content that resonates on LinkedIn, you can link to the registration page and people will go and they will register. So it started with that one-off webinar that we were really talking about and educating. This was their number one problem that everyone was worried about. So it really resonated with a lot of people. So we basically repurposed that. We cut it up. We started putting it out on LinkedIn and we were dabbling in Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but you kind of you test all those channels and then you narrow down to what really makes an impact and then you focus there. And LinkedIn was really, really great. And we just had a lot of people joining. So we had our original customer base who we invited, and then it really just blossomed from there via email. Email is always where we see the most of our registrants come in, even now. But LinkedIn, people see that stuff on LinkedIn. And if you're in the higher ed industry, and we saw the same thing with Synthace, they're quieter industries on LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn as a marketer and it's just noise. It's everybody saying something. If you're a biologist and you go on LinkedIn, at least 6-7 months ago, it was pretty quiet. And the same thing went for higher ed at the time. So we have all these higher ed people who are on LinkedIn and they go there and they kind of futz around because they know they're supposed to be there. Now all of a sudden there's content for them, created for them by people like them. And it really starts a conversation. So there's huge opportunity for these industries that are still kind of quiet on LinkedIn to go in and own the conversation. And that's really what we did, and it worked.
Yeah. I love the live approach as well. The thought of building that community and that engagement, that kind of two-way conversation.
And like you can see people nodding when you say something, and people got really excited about it. So like they would like change their Zoom background to like their school mascot. Like people would get really, really excited about attending. Like they looked forward to it. So it was a really exciting thing to be a part of.
I mean, this is literally just a webinar set up on Zoom, right? With people joining and engaging and asking questions live.
Yeah, so easy.
What's to stop anyone doing that? Right. I'm going to end this, and I'm just going to go and create a Zoom right now, and just
I mean, so like it doesn't have the same polish, right? Like, I've been trialing different webinar software because like I like a crisp image, and like you know it's easier to like Zoom recordings are not easy to like make look nice when you want to put a LinkedIn post together. So there's obviously drawbacks, but that live aspect of it where like people can come and they're excited to come, and it's like something that's on their calendar, it's recurring. So like they'll like come and they'll just like eat lunch and hear people talk about their experiences, and they can learn, and you know it resonates because people are nodding their head and they're saying in the chat like, yes, this resonates. That's really helpful for a marketing team. You know, like imagine you're going and you're creating a content strategy, and you know exactly what you need to talk about because they've told you they want you to talk about it. It's also just a really, really great way to learn what your audience needs.
Amazing. Yeah, love that experience. And so I'm assuming you took a lot of those learnings from Mongoose to Synthace. Like, I'd love to like dig into what those first kind of 90-day period was like when you stepped through the door at Synthace, and what did you do there? You know, you've got all of this experience, all of these learnings. What was that period like?
So that period is always like, I have an entirely new audience. I have an entirely new dictionary of terms to learn because our audience speaks in terms that you have no idea. And that I first learned in hospitality. I walk into the hospitality industry. I'm like, what are we even talking about? Like, it was just like you walk into a meeting and everyone's speaking this jargon. You have no idea what is going on. I created a little glossary for myself just so I knew what all of these hospitality terms were. I had to do the same thing at the industrial manufacturing company, the same thing in EdTech, and I had to do the same thing at Synthace. So the thing with Synthace is like, these are biologists, these are scientists, like these people are brilliant, and they are doing really, really hard things with biology, which is notoriously difficult and impossible to predict. So a lot of those first 90 days is you're learning the product, what it does. You're learning the problems that it solves. You are digging through all of the content. So like blogs, videos, webinars, interviewing your new peers. And I'm trying to understand like what robocolumns are. Like you might know what robocolumns are because you work for SPT Lab Tech and you know what these things are. But like, I'm a marketer. I'm like, what are robocolumns? What is downstream process purification? Like, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. So a lot of that was just building out a glossary for myself and learning the terms and really getting comfortable with the content. That takes forever. You cannot walk into a new role and then sit and say, okay, I'm going to read for the next 3 months and then I'll be ready to start doing marketing. So there are a lot of quick things that you can do at any company when you walk in that will make a big impact that you don't need to know about your audience yet. And a lot of that is on social media. So a lot of that is you can easily clean up and make a LinkedIn or a YouTube page look more professional. And anyone can do that with Canva and some basic graphic design knowledge, right? So you update the header images, you make sure that the profile picture is like spaced well and looks really nice and crisp. You go in, you create playlists on YouTube. You just organize everything that's already there and you add new thumbnails. All of a sudden, you look like a much more reputable company that people are going to be much more willing to trust without needing to know anything about your audience, right? So I always start with social and just testing the waters on all of the channels. And what's great about that is you already know you have to look through all of these blogs. You have to read all of the content that's at your disposal. You have to go through all these webinars and see what content you have just to learn about the company and the audience. While you're doing that, all of that stuff can be repurposed and recycled and broken down and published on LinkedIn in a series of posts, or video that could be, you can, get clips of it that were really impactful and put those things on social media. So like, that's how I started at Synthace. And that's really a lot of what those first 90 days looked like. We had like webinars already planned that I took over. So some of it was just like learning the processes already in place and executing them, just because like that was a hole that needed to be filled, marketing ops, things like that. And then once you get that, and you can kind of build a content reproduction framework from there, because you get a feeling for like, okay, here's who we have in our team, here's who can do this, this, and this, in repurposing a piece of content. Then you start creating new content after that, and you have, you know what channels resonate, you know what kind of messaging resonates, you have some kind of idea of what your audience is doing and what your product is helping with. Then you can start creating new content.
Yeah, cool. So you went into Synthace initially as demand gen manager, now head of marketing. At that time then, during that first period, I assume you were doing a lot of analysis, reporting on the things going on to kind of see what is working, what isn't working, what are we going to test, and what are we going to carry on doing?
Yes.
And what kind of things were you looking at specifically to kind of tell you that?
So I think that it's important to look at, there's like the marketing metrics that you think of that are like vanity metrics. Those are like, in my view, those are health metrics, right? Like you put something out on LinkedIn, a lot of people are liking, are like, okay, like that resonates. It's not, maybe it's not converting to revenue right now, but like it resonates. And then we have, we do a lot of our marketing in HubSpot and all of our sales in Salesforce. So we set up campaigns in HubSpot, mirror those campaigns in Salesforce, and then you can start to see like, okay, like what marketing activities was this contact engaged with that then raised their hands and then, converted to a legitimate opportunity. And, that's going to differ at every company. Like, is stage 1 op legitimate pipeline, or is it stage 2? Like whatever it's considered legitimate pipeline. Some people are like, oh, whatever is converting at 25%. I consider it whatever sales considers legitimate pipeline. So if it's something that they're going to forecast against, I consider that stage to be legitimate pipeline. So you look at hand raisers, and I say that because you can call it MQL, you can call it a high intent MQL, you can call it an inbound demo request, you can call it a million different things. They don't mean anything because they're different. Everyone has a different term that they call it. But somebody who has raised their hand and expressed explicit intent to purchase. That's what I consider a hand raiser. And that can be from the website, that can be from a webinar, that can be from SDR outreach. I consider SDRs to just be like, whether they report into marketing or not, we're all top of funnel. We're all working towards the same thing. What they're doing is supporting marketing. What marketing is doing is supporting them. So I consider us like a unified pipeline team, especially at the top of funnel. So you can track overall hand raisers, and you can track valid ones, because we have a lot of like students and professors who are like really into it, but like they're not necessarily going to convert to pipeline. So we'll clean it up and look at, okay, the valid demo requests, the valid hand raisers that came in, what campaigns were they related to? And then when you look in the pipeline itself, you can see what products they're looking at. And that's how you can, or what products or applications are associated with that deal. So you can tie it all back to the marketing that led them there. And then there's also like, we have self-reported attribution on all of our request forms. So like people will tell you like, oh, I first heard about you at this industry conference, or I first heard about you, on LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn, and once we cleaned up YouTube was a surprising amount of volume when it came from like, where did you first hear about us? So LinkedIn and YouTube were like, people were telling us like, we found you on LinkedIn, we found you on YouTube. So like those are proven channels. Like those are bringing in valid demo requests in our ICP. Like those are going to convert, those are converting to pipeline. So we know that that's working.
And so did you already have like the kind of things like that set up, like self-reported attribution, before you came in? So it was just a case of analyzing that data quite heavily?
Yeah. And I feel like every company has their own like ops issues, right? So we're a Salesforce and HubSpot shop, so like they speak in different languages, so they don't always match up. So a lot of it was manual, but like the VP of marketing when I joined Synthace, also brilliant. So like she knew to have self-reported attribution on there, whereas like that's something that I added at Mongoose to all of our forms. So there was a breadth of data that I walked into at Synthace that was already kind of pointing us in the right direction, but we weren't executing a really strong LinkedIn strategy at that point. We weren't doing one-on-one LinkedIn enablement with our subject matter experts to really scale our visibility on LinkedIn. So we had some, it just needed to be refined a little bit.
All right, so let's dive into that then, shall we? I'd love to know more about the LinkedIn strategy that I suppose you kind of drove and wanted to implement at Synthace.
Sure. So there was a LinkedIn strategy already happening. And at the time we had our VP of marketing, we had a product marketing manager, and we had a brand and communications manager, director. I forget what his title was at that point in time. These were very, very busy people. This was a marketing team of 3. LinkedIn, and I'm sure everybody who is in marketing and is responsible for social media, like if social media is one of your tasks, it falls off. Like it's a pain, and like you don't have time. You have to come up with something every day, and it's a hassle, and you can't execute as strong as you would like to if like that's not a dedicated part of your role. So I come in, that is a dedicated part of my role. And they're all like, thank God, I don't want to do this anymore. So it was just like a really fragmented in ownership. So it was fragmented in impact. So taking over LinkedIn, it was a really good way to acclimate myself, the audience and the company and our content. But it was also like, you could start building a cohesive strategy there. And sometimes like that's just learning, right? Like you're going to post some things that are going to be absolute duds, and that's fine. And you're going to post some things that really resonate, and that's fine. That's all part of how you find out what's working. Like you're not going to test if messaging works like on your website. You're going to test on LinkedIn and see if it resonates. And then if it resonates, then you put it on your website. And so that's kind of how LinkedIn got started. We have a co-founder and chief scientific officer who's just like the best guy and brilliant, and he knows what he's talking about. And he is a DOE evangelist, and he has such good things to say and a great point of view. He was not being consistent on LinkedIn. And it was like, you had to like drag him kicking and screaming into putting a post together. Same with our lab team. Like they're busy. These people are busy. They're doing important things. Like in their head, they're like, why would I like marketing and like doing a webinar for marketing is like, it's such a big lift, and like, it's public, and like, what if I make a mistake? And like, I don't have time for this, and people don't have time for it because it's not like part of their jobs. So we started with the CSO, and he's come full circle. Like he just posted an ode to marketing on LinkedIn because he's like, if you do marketing the right way, it's just value, and it's change management, and it's culture changing. It's shifting perceptions and opening people up to these new ways of doing things. And like once that clicks in like if you have a CEO who doesn't understand marketing, for example, or doesn't have time to post on LinkedIn, like they just don't think it's important. So once they see that it's important, they're going to start doing it. So he started seeing it was important. He started doing it. We already had one of our, like a team member who's a scientific solutions consultant who's like already very popular on LinkedIn. Scientists love robots, love them. So like you post a picture of a robot moving around, everybody loves it. So he was already really, really popular on LinkedIn. And you could see that was bringing in demo requests, because people would come in and be like, oh yeah, we saw Daniel on LinkedIn. He's amazing. We want to know more about your product. So we got the CSO, we just like kind of held his hand a little bit. And like, if you sit down and you just talk through their point of view with them and like give them a draft of something, they'll tweak it and they'll post it. You just have to make it really, really easy for them. And our content marketing manager has really stepped up and done amazing work in her LinkedIn enablement. But the people who have something to say and are willing to try LinkedIn out as a channel, those are your first people. And then it started to spread, like other people saw that was working. So they wanted to give it a try. So it started with the brand page, just cleaning that up, testing it out, seeing what works and what doesn't, seeing what resonates with the audience and what doesn't. And that was before a lot of the algorithm changes where LinkedIn has basically now nerfed brand pages to nothing. Like, it has to be active. You have to still be working on it, but it's all about individual contributors now. And so now we have like 5 people who we're working with who are all posting, like, they all have their different niche and expertise that they're posting about, but it was a really great way to set up that strategy. And like, I'm just glad that, I mean, now it's going to be more difficult because like you don't have that brand page visibility as much to like get up and running. But just like working with your subject matter experts, finding what they're interested in and they have something to say about, and then getting them active on LinkedIn is just so crucial now.
And in terms of finding that thing for them to say,
Mm-hmm.
how do marketing work with these people to create that content for them? Like, are you creating this content for them, or are you enabling them to create this content through like joint webinars or something like that? Like, how does that massive content for that huge brand awareness get created?
So they create the content. We structure it for them. So Annie, our content marketing manager, she's, again, the best. But she'll sit down one-on-one and she'll interview our subject matter experts and she'll record it. So she just gets them talking. She'll prompt them. They have a conversation. She basically takes the transcript from their recording, formulates it into a cohesive thought that would do really well on LinkedIn because it's formatted the right way. It's broken down. It's concise but complete. And then she gives it to them with some guidance on, okay, here's how you post it. And then they can tweak it from there, make sure that it sounds like them. But like, that's really all it is. It's not as complicated as I feel like some people might make it out to be.
Yeah, but I suppose it's removing the barrier to entry for, like you said, those busy people. I've been there. I've been in the environment with those scientists and the product marketers who like are so invested in what they're doing and not necessarily, like, marketing just isn't as high on their priority list as some other things. And removing those barriers to enable them to produce content, like literally sending them, this piece is like, well, these are your words because it was an interview with you. So
it sounds like them. They agree with the content. All it is a half-hour one-on-one that you record.
Yeah.
So
do you do anything else with that content, or is it just then used on LinkedIn? Is that a blog? Is that a YouTube video? Or
so
we're
working on scaling it now. We're just getting to the point that we're scaling the number of people that we're doing this with. Now we're going to scale like what channels, like how else can we repurpose this and what channels can we put it out on. But yeah, it's working really well, and we're finally getting to the point that we have buy-in. A lot of scientists in particular are hesitant about doing stuff on LinkedIn because once you say something, it's public. Scientists are so used to having to defend everything they say with such concrete evidence and deep research. And that's why, like, if you look at like a case study for life sciences SaaS company, like they're so long, right? Because like you need to deep dive into all of the science, and like a scientist is putting it together. So it's going to be long and really, really in depth. Once a scientist goes and says something on LinkedIn, they're like, well, look, I need to defend that now. Like once it gets posted, it feels so much more real to them. And they're not as used to sharing opinions and thought leadership pieces because they're so rooted in fact and science. So it's a very big mindset shift for them. Like our newsletter. So our newsletter, we basically pivoted from like, here's the Synthace newsletter, we're going to put it out. Now it's like a newsletter written by 2 members of our lab team, and people love it. And like our one scientist, she opened the newsletter with like, I'm an introvert, and as a scientist who is an introvert, like going to conferences and talking to like CSOs and like VPs of R&D, like it's so intimidating. And like, but like at the end of the day, they're real people, and they're like, they can be just as introverted as you. And people are like, that resonated with me. Like, I agree. Like, I feel that. Like, people really, really connect when it's other scientists talking. So I would just say that like, that's the biggest hurdle I would say for life science marketers is like getting that mindset shift. and it's just going to take a little while, and like that's okay. That's like they're doing all of these amazing things in the lab that like I can't even begin to understand. Like I understand to a point now, but you know, getting them bought into marketing is, in this industry in particular, is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and this is why I kind of said at the start, like, this is why I admire what Synthace do, and especially to kind of break the mold of such a traditional industry where facts are so important and opinions aren't really out there because they need to be supported by data and studies. It's like finding that balance and striking it perfectly. I think you're doing incredibly well. And one of the things that actually caught my attention, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you, was the video on your homepage and that I've seen on like socials and stuff, which is not a usual life science video, right? Can you talk us through this video and why you did it and the thought process behind it? Because I love it. Like,
I mean, it is so well done. And I can't take any credit for that. So that was our former VP of marketing and our former director of brand and communications. Like he did the script and she, you know, she kind of led that whole initiative, but it's people first, right? And those aren't hired scientists. Like those are Synthace employees, like with scientific backgrounds, right? So like you have people who have experienced this pain and they talk to prospects and customers every day and they know in depth like what that pain costs. Like because it has real business costs, these pains that our audience is facing. So I mean, as far as like the why, I think just like you said, like there aren't videos like this in life sciences. And like these at the end of the day are people. Like these scientists aren't robots. Like we love robots, right? Like don't get me wrong. But these are people who have pain points and they watch Netflix just like the rest of us. Like they relate to good entertainment, high quality. Like this is somebody who's just like, oh my gosh, like I have to run a DOE and it's like I have to do all of these things. And it's somebody who's like, okay, but you know that there's like an easier way of doing this, right? And that's a problem awareness thing. Like a lot of people don't know that there's a better way of doing it. They're like, well, I'm going to be doing hand pipetting and one factor at a time experimentation. And I can use my robot in a really limited way because that's all I know how to do. And this is going to take forever and be $10 million and 10 years long. And like it's this like, here's what your pains are. And people are immediately going to relate to it as their own lived experience. They're going to relate to it because it's like a real person with scientific background, like not an actor. And then that mindset shift, like, oh, like we'll just use Synthace. Like there's a better way to be doing this. Like this, all of your pain points, like that is exactly what this product does. And then like a quick overview of what the product does and how it helps. And then you go about your merry way. And it's just a really impactful video for all of those reasons. And it stands out from the noise because everything else is just like a webinar. Like webinars are great. Like webinars have their time and place. Don't get me wrong. Like in my view, webinars are like, I have to accomplish a thing and that thing is really hard. And I need just like someone to walk me through step by step, like how this thing works and how I can do it better. That's a webinar. Very valuable. There's the other side that is completely missed in the life sciences. That's like, we have problems as an industry and we need to change them. And there are better ways of doing things. And so the video just really leans into that side where there's so much opportunity to start those conversations and own the conversations because nobody else is having them.
Yeah, amazing. And if you haven't seen this video, it's on Synthace's homepage. Like it is amazing. It's like it's
so kind of good. Anne and Khaled are like they just work at Synthace. Like what's annoying about Synthace is everyone is like a brilliant scientist with this in-depth technical knowledge, and they're good at everything else too. Like again, they're not actors; they're just like also really good at videos for whatever reason. It's like,
it's like the perfect brand awareness video. Like it is so great. It's gold. So go and check it out if you haven't already, just for some inspiration, really, on like what's possible. If Synthace are doing it in life science, like, you know, we can all be doing this kind of stuff. So while Synthace are, you know, truly embracing this era of like entertaining / educational content for demand generation, like really going into that buyer first, human centric marketing, it actually looks like on your website anyway that there's still some perhaps I'd say traditional tactics being used in there too. Like I see some gated content in there, state of the industry 2024. There's some blogs, not necessarily like consistent, but it still looks like you're doing these other things that, you know, we might say is kind of like traditional lead gen. What's the thinking behind that? Do you still see value in these things?
I'm very much in the camp of ungate everything. It is a low on our priority list with older content pieces. So all of our newer content pieces we've left ungated. Something that's really, really high value, like the industry report that's targeting specifically our buyers, there is value to information capture there. They're like, we're still small enough that we're still very much building a database and a communication list for like our email marketing as a channel. Like we're still building out that channel. So there's value in getting those contacts into our database. Outside of that, I don't see a lot of value in terms of gating anything. So like if there are things gated on our website, we just haven't been able to go back in and ungate everything. We just like haven't had the time. We're doing a million other things. It's just a lower priority. Anything that we have gated on the website is pretty much available for free, open on YouTube. So if people ask for it, or like if our customer success team is going to send something to them, they're just going to send them to the YouTube page. They're not going to send them to the gated page. At the same time, like you get these like extra notifications like, oh, like we keep seeing this form doing really, really well. So like we know that this case study is resonating with people. So like, fine. But it's much less of a, yes, we see value in it, and more of a, we haven't gotten to it yet. And in the case of the industry report, like this is such a high value piece of content for a very, very specific persona that we're speaking to. And we just need their contact information to be able to continue that conversation. So that's kind of the thinking behind the newer content that's gated and the older content that's gated.
So when you say continue the conversation after somebody has downloaded the industry report, which I get like it's a pretty, you know, high quality piece of content. It's not a kind of standard ebook or guide that somebody might buy. But yeah, when you say continue the conversation, what do you mean by that? Like what kind of communication is happening?
Yeah, so now we can talk to them via email, and we're not going to bother them via email. Like we're not like, I'm not dropping.
There's no nurturing going on here.
No, oh my God, I'm not dropping you into a nurture sequence.
Right.
But we can share and regularly hit your inbox with our newsletter, for example, because now you're opted into communications, right? So now every couple of weeks, you're going to hear from 2 scientists at our lab team. You're going to see the content that we're loving. Like that's a really popular thing that I think everyone should put in their newsletter. Like what content like has your subject matter experts, like what have they identified as like something really cool happening in the industry? And then all of a sudden you're like the morning brew of your industry, you know, like you go and like, oh, like these are relevant links that I should be clicking into, like as like my 5-minute digest in the life sciences industry that has been curated for me. But at the same time, we can share more information about resources. We just launched this week a DOE email course. Learn DOE in 6 minutes a day. Where else in the life sciences industry are you getting quick and dirty courses for free in your inbox? Like we're trying to make more use of email as a channel. It's just been difficult because, you know, GDPR and we have a lot of people opted out. So we're not going to talk to you. So a big play is like, we need more people opted into communications from us. And then we can provide them more value there through the newsletter, through things like the DOE email course, through like, we will eventually be kicking off more regular product updates so people know what's going on. We're not selling to them. It's just informing. Yeah. And email is still one of the most impactful channels for B2B companies. It's just, you know, a lot of people do it so poorly that it's growing your strategy there to make sure that at any time you're going to land in their inbox, like you better have earned that space. Like you better be giving them something of value that they actually want. And people want it. Like people, like we get feedback all the time. Like this is such a refreshing read. Like it's like, it's nice to hear someone talking like a human who is a scientist like me. And we share the same problems and the same anxieties. And we've had the same nightmare experience in the lab where this experiment just like totally went to shit one day. It's just, it's a really, really good way to connect with people that people don't do very well. So part of that is you need to build up that database so you can hit them there.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to understanding channels like email, it's important to understand the differences between industries as well. Like I would say life science professionals are probably slightly more receptive to emails than other industries. Like marketers, like we probably just hate any form of email landing in our inbox and probably just hit junk straight away. But it's funny, you talk about email, because in the last episode we were rating B2B marketing tactics and email came up. And I think we all gave it a 2, but I kind of said, like, I can't give it any lower because we all still try to build an email list. Like with our pillar pages and stuff, like we still have optional downloads there. We send nothing after they download that piece of content apart from a blog digest email whenever a new blog is released. But it's like having that database of people that you own. Well, I suppose you don't own that. You get what I'm saying. Anyway,
they pay you in their contact information, and that is that at this point is a really steep price. I hate giving away my email. If I request a demonstration for something like any kind of software, I'll put in a fake phone number because don't call me. Like marketers, somebody. Oh my god, I caught a cold call from an SDR this morning on my personal phone. I'm like, why are you calling me? Don't call me. For any SDR or BDR, if you are targeting marketers, do not call them. Like. That actually still works in the life sciences. That definitely still works in industrial manufacturing. It's still a very valid outbound motion if you're doing it with the right audience. But like, don't call marketers. Just don't do it. Email is like, marketers still don't like email, but like I've got a couple emails, like newsletters that I still follow that like I see value in. So it's like getting an email now is like I don't know. It's a really good intent indicator, not like for purchasing, but like that what you're doing is cool and they like it. And they like people are just less and less open to doing that. So like when we do have the industry report and people will put their email in, like scientists aren't as resistant to things like that as marketers are, but like you still want that. And like if we keep hitting them with content that's of value to them, like they're going to keep receiving it. And so like that's how you need that channel.
Yeah, and like email is one of those places where you almost can guarantee you're gonna have that big hit. Like if you were releasing a new product, like groundbreaking product feature, you think, let's get an email out here, because you know there's gonna be a lift from that email. You can guarantee that this amount of people are gonna see this content at this time. Like you almost can't do that with any other channel, really.
I mean, you really can't do with email either. Like the number of times I have had to tell a wider team that like, if we send a mass email, it is not guaranteed to get to the recipient. I'm like, listen, like open rates on a good day are going to look at like 25%. Open rates are on a bad day are going to look like in the teens. Like like us sending an email is not a guarantee that they will receive it. So like there's a whole other aspect of email that you have to consider. That's one-on-one communications for really essential product updates, for like event invitations. Like marketing emails are just part of your overall email strategy. And then that's a whole other enablement plan that like if you have an SDR team, if you have a CS team and you need to be sending comms to them, like they need additional support from you because like they're also in the weeds doing a million other things. So like, that's not a priority. So I found a lot of success in like at Mongoose, I created an entire library of outreach emails, not like they had space for customization, but a lot of sales teams, they don't know what resources you have to offer, or not always necessarily. Like sometimes you have really, really junior BDRs or SDRs. They need guidance in like what personas to hit with what content at what time. And so marketing teams can kind of build out that template database for them. And again, you're all on the same team. Like you're all working on top of funnel. And it's going to be very rare that an outbound email books a demo that marketing hasn't touched first, or that, a lot of times marketing will be really, really in this person's face for a long time. An SDR email is like, that's that last touch attribution that the contact responds to. Like we're on the same team, we're working together. So like the more that you can support each other, and like I could never be in sales or CS. Like it's brutal over there. So like the more support that we can offer those groups, and the more that we can unify as one commercial team and one growth team, the bigger lift you're going to see across the board.
Yeah, amazing. I love that point. Like the old debate between marketing versus sales and stuff like that. I think the best
so
companies
tired
are driving growth now. Yeah, it's done. The argument's done now. Like the highest growth companies are working together. They don't simply don't have that divide.
If you're still working at a company and you're measuring sales and marketing in ways that pit them against each other, just leave. I don't know what change I don't know what change you can make at like an executive level. Like if you're just like on the marketing team, like if you're an executive and you have the ability to unify the teams into like one growth team, then do that. But like, yeah, if you're fighting for attribution still, leave. Like that's so tired.
Right, you heard it here first, guys. Jessica Stonish, having a hard time in marketing, proving your worth, leave.
Yep.
Full stop. Right, that's been really fascinating hearing the story, and yeah, I just love to kind of dive deep into what Synthace are doing at the moment, because I think it's really like almost revolutionary for the life science industry. It's absolutely fascinating. Mm-hmm. So we're in 2024 now. We're actually a month in already, but where are you placing your bets for this year in other things? Like what are you banking on working in B2B marketing for Synthace?
Hold on, let me move my cat real quick. People first is going to win. So if you are not effectively leveraging the subject matter experts and the people that you have on your team who have shared life experiences with your audience and can speak to the pain points authentically, then you're really going to struggle moving forward. It's going to be all people first from here on. Like nobody cares what a brand has to say anymore. Like Synthace saying something, like especially in the life sciences where like that was already kind of limited in impact. A brand saying something like is just filtered out a lot of the time. A person saying something, that's what's going to get a point across. That's what's going to change mindsets, create cultural shifts, create trust. That then will create trust in your brand. It has to be people first, and in every channel you can, in your newsletters, on LinkedIn, in your virtual event strategy. It all has to be people first. I would say that my second bet is you have to be really, really agile. There are so many changes going into 2024 around algorithms, attribution, email and how you're getting email through to people is changing. Like there are so many changes happening in marketing now, and they're happening really, really fast. So you need to keep on that. And that's the only way that you can take advantage of these things. So like LinkedIn, for example, they're prioritizing newsletters now. So we just copied and pasted our newsletter into LinkedIn, posted it as a newsletter. We got 1,500 more people subscribed to our newsletter automatically. And they're getting an extra hit from LinkedIn, which is like, has a pretty good chance of being opened and viewed right to their inbox. So like, there's so many places where you can increase visibility if you know what's happening in those channels. So identify your high impact channels and know what's going on with them and stay really, really on top of it. Because then you can, like, they're not hacks. They're just like letting the platform work for you because they're already doing it. It's not like back in the day where you'd be like, oh, like, let's just run a bunch of LinkedIn polls because LinkedIn's prioritizing polls. Like, yeah, whatever. Like, there's still some of that, I guess, but you can use the channels really, really well if you know what's going on with them.
Yeah. Okay. That's the two bets for this year.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're over the hour, so let's wrap it up there. But that was absolutely fascinating, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What gets me is how many marketers are out there that are just doing great things, getting results time and time again, but we don't hear from them. Like, we hear the same voices, so it's so nice to, hear from other people and these experiences. And yeah, it's such a great journey you've been on, and I'll keep following you and Synthace and seeing the great work.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much for having me.
No worries. Right, let's wrap it up there, and we'll catch you next time.